Hello everybody, welcome back to the Jeep Journals. My name is Ray. And this channel, this particular medium is called YouTube. And on this channel, I present a lot of information about me and the things that I've discovered along the journey that we're all sharing. And in this journey, some of us are showing a percentage of ourselves, and some of us are showing a much higher percentage of ourselves. We are all showing percentages of ourselves, but some of those percentages of ourselves that we show are sometimes representative of some other group. For an example, I've got this t-shirt on. It's from a show that I attended with friends and with family. Let that resonate just a little bit if you're listening and you happen to be some of the people who are present. Maybe not even at that show, but at any Rush concert, or any concert for that matter, where music is celebrated. In those eras, when we were able to come together as big groups of friends and participate together with our hearts so filled with joy that we might actually try to sing along with the crowd, whether or not we believed in our voice in front of our coworkers, for an example, or not. So in these deeper thoughts that I like to engage with my audience, not just with, and I say with my audience, because in some way, much like these guitars as I'm speaking, we can begin to resonate together. I don't know if you can hear that in the audio, but these guitars, this one in particular, my dad's guitar, really seems to resonate with what I'm saying. I don't even know if it's in tune right now. I haven't had the heart to play it since I received it back. I repaired this guitar. It came out of a dumpster. It had no hardware on it. But look at the amazing artistry on it. Somebody took time to draw these images that you see here on this guitar. After adding hardware, this guitar absolutely has heart. It has a feeling when you play music with it. So you can imagine, as I go through my next segment where I showcase all of my guitars and I tell you a story with each of these guitars, you can imagine what this one might tell as far as the story is concerned. For those of you who are watching YouTube and you're trying to find out about me, I also love finding out about you. This is a community. Every engagement opportunity that we have, including that to communicate with one another on a business level, is an orchestration of events that quite possibly were meant to occur. So us communicating, whether it was by finding ourselves again on some group chat session, or whether it's because you continuously look but don't necessarily subscribe to what I'm saying, we're communicating whether we know it or not, even in our indifference when we fail to speak up when it's our turn to participate. Without a group participation, imagine if this band, or any band, got on stage and sang their hearts out, and then nobody even heard the words that were in the song, or enjoyed the melody and the feeling that was transpired with that melody, or even applauded? What if nobody applauded anybody else? What if nobody nurtured one another with some kind of positive reinforcement? What kind of crop would we have for harvesting? And so when I relate things, I like to touch on a spiritual aspect that many people will kind of almost annotate. Whereas what I'm trying to believe, at least that I'm doing, that I'm representing, is that we are absolutely embracing the conversation of spirituality on this channel. This channel is called the Jeep Journals. A lot of this story has been able to be summed up during the time when I've had my magnificent vehicle, my steed, my steel horse that I ride on, and this vehicle has allowed me to see so many things that I believe are an extremely important message. I don't know her last name, but I know there's an activist called Greta in the world. And if I could communicate with her, it would almost probably feel like I was communicating with a genius, with an Einstein. Because the revolutionary thinkers of their time, who can see a bigger picture, can understand that there's a problem. What's really being overlooked, though, is that this revolution does not include an upwards, backwards compatibility inclusion, where we are currently expecting our experienced in the old ways to teach our youth, and while we are voting with our stocks and purchases on the investments that our youth can really choose from, we'll never recognize that our youth's ideas never hit the upper levels of this communication divide that we have right now. And I'll say this communication divide is so dangerous that me talking about this has even made some people uncomfortable. And it does so because it includes a lot of personal examples. In my personal example, I reference a guitar. My dad rescued it from a trash heap. I've done the same thing. We all have seen something that has value. We all have seen someone that has value, but the item does not recognize its full potential because in that era, it might be misunderstood as valueless. Just because I don't command an hourly, fictitious income amount, because it's all part of a fiction. If it wasn't, then why would women earn less than men? Continually. Despite the fact that if the youth knew this was true and unfair, and the adults knew that some of the youth were being bullied, and the adults being bullied as well, somehow we would level the playing field and see eye to eye. But so far, it's difficult to even speak into someone's presence. Because the very notion of taking on the rationale that includes the truth can sometimes cause a house of cards collapsing right under our very selves. And if we rely on the house of cards for that roof over our head, the house of cards will come falling down. Ladies and gentlemen, and I mean this in the most inclusive way possible, all of us have the capacity to put ourselves into somebody else's shoes. If an entire midsection of the United States just burned down and people were displaced, loved ones, do we recognize that? or just because we have a roof over our head, even if we burned our own house down on purpose, do we even take time to think that maybe we could be helping other people restore the damages, whether they were intentional or acts of God? And if I don't take the time to recognize you, having been created in the image of God, I don't know that I ever took the time to recognize you. A lot of times in my past, that was the case. As an adolescent who did not make much, who came up in a family who never made much, or rarely made much, I was faced with what I thought of as poverty. Because I was a child, I never accepted that, whether I had to beg, steal, or borrow to get to where I was going to be. It wasn't until time passed by that I learned the recklessness of my adolescence. There is an entity that comes to kill, steal, and destroy. And these three things are things that they're the underpinnings of what some texts will list as 10 rules that we should be willing to recognize and abide by to be within constraints of being a friend to someone else. As I look at the time, as I look at the era, what I see are things that are falling apart. And part of the reason they're falling apart and in part, falling together, falling apart, as things are aligning as they should, sometimes it's hard for me to communicate, I believe God's will is being done on heaven as it is on earth, in earth as it is in heaven. Even the very words that I present to you are moved by what I would call the Holy Spirit. And by Holy Spirit, what I mean is I'm picturing you as my best friend sitting here right now, and you've taken a time out to listen to me because you value my insight. And I know that's the case because as I watch the subscriber base, as I watch the views, the number of views, this is all just based on logic that's reported to me. It could all be made up. But as I watch it, and as I believe that it must be at least to some degree accurate, because I get feedback from my friends and family, and since I know it's accurate to some degree, I take it with a grain of blueberry. A fresh bread, a bread that can only last if you give it some kind of refrigeration. Real bread will spoil if it goes uneaten. The bread that we typically bring home in our sack lunches, it's not adequate. And Greta and I would be able to talk about this and also discuss how all of the majority of these products come in plastic, even though they last indefinitely, unnaturally. So then we start thinking there's a whole process to the equation. We could easily change these distribution methods, if we used our manners. How can we make sure no one is getting bullied and our lunch ingredients come to us in ways that not only are unspoiled, but also that can be distributed globally, not just to one neighborhood so that the caramel flavored syrup is in that neighborhood for sure, because that's where the sales are highest, but to everyone who finds a way to reduce the actual imprint and footprint and destructive prints that we are leaving on one another's children and grandparents. What we want to do is bridge the communication so that things can resonate. Like I said, my dad's guitar resonates with me. I don't play it right now. And maybe that's a matter of why things are not progressing. And at the same time, if you've heard my story, I am actively reaching out in all kinds of ways with full articulation of my communication so that people can understand the concept. I'm overwhelmed with gratitude at all of the opportunity I have in these adverse times. It's unbelievable that I'm able to participate at these levels, that I'm able to participate with the perceived freedom that a lot of us are talking about wanting to go to war and kill for. Speaking of killing, in those 10 rules, if you're a follower of one subset of peace, somewhere in there it talks about someone should not kill. Now, how we define that can be the same as how we define someone shouldn't be stealing. Let's talk briefly about the concept of killing. If I myself found myself killing somebody, whether it be in a home invasion or overseas where I'm killing people using technology that was brought to me to fight the opposition, who I couldn't even communicate with yet because I myself didn't learn all of the language, and I'm gunning someone down. This is just an example. I'm not trying to make anyone angry. It's just a thought experiment. We're going to talk about theft in a second. If those two circumstances happen, do I judge them differently? And if so, how did I learn to judge differently? As a child, how would I think and apply logic to those two circumstances? Speaking of, if I were a child and I were hungry and I didn't have the money to access the bread that would satisfy that hunger, and if there were another child that had all the money in the world and they were able to just lavishly eat that bread up, and I saw one opportunity to grab a piece and take it, I'm not saying it's right. Should the punishment be harsher than someone embezzling millions or hundreds of dollars or less? Or is theft? The thing that was malleable by the ultimate teacher in the book that's generally referenced, which has 10 rules, is there was a character. And the character would walk around talking and healing people. And he didn't just talk, he carried out actions. And he explained it in ways that the children would listen and understand, because at a certain age, maybe our advanced logic is no longer advanced. These are just theories that I have after traveling and experiencing some of the things that I've experienced among many people, many of whom I believed were comfortable friends and families at first, and who I found out later, I would fight for them, but they would never fight for me. Maybe perhaps I had been fighting for the wrong friends and family for quite some time. And then there are strangers that we can immediately look at and come to some conclusion in our mind based on our own perception. If we've never gone through a hardship, we may not be able to see. And if we've gone through experiences where we've seen people go through hardship due to some circumstances, we might even apply that same hardship to anything that looks remotely like the experience that we had. So the first thing about seeing someone before we gun each other down, how do we communicate? That dog just barked right then. It communicated. The birds are calling out. It's a blue jay. And communication is something that can come across as universal if only we take the time to pay, what is it, ladies and gentlemen? Attention. When we pay attention. So I'd like to take just a moment to ask you, this is the first time I'm going to ask you in this series. This is kicking off a much simpler series. This is the first time I'm going to ask that you visit my website, moneyforahaircut.com, and just take a brief look at it. As you can tell, I have not had a haircut in some time. I'm actually kind of pleased that I haven't thought about the logic that was taught to me for generations that I should be getting my hair cut every couple of weeks. I grew my hair out once before and donated it. I'm not sure what I'm going to be doing this time that I've grown it out, but the intent was to donate it. I'm going to ask you to provide your own insight as to what I should do with this beautiful hair that I've taken the time to keep healthy and that I can donate to someone else who needs it, or for whatever purpose it goes to. Make your recommendation, but please visit my site, moneyforahaircut.com, all spelled out. And if you're not paying attention still at this point, however long we've been going on in this segment, if you're finding that you're having trouble focusing on what's being said, which is essentially a story about something that's in the rearview mirror, something that hindsight's 20/20. Now that I've got hindsight and clarity from fasting, from praying, from introducing calm to my thought process, now that I can be calm, I can allow the conversation to become communication. And good communication feels like a warm hug with a best friend. So for all of you who are participating and who are helping by contributing, thank you so much. I understand what you're reciprocating. I understand what you're hearing from me. And I'm going to go so far as to tell you I've come up with an idea that I might change my Reverb shop name to Gifted Guitars. And what I'd like to do, because I'm not specifically in a position where monetarily I'm having trouble, but what I'd like to do, because I still have my own past that I'm sometimes paying for, sometimes for more than my own past for that matter, because of generational issues, but I would absolutely welcome your contributions. And what I want to do is show you in a different segment that in some cases, people will purchase an item that I'm selling on my guitar website, and what I'll do is send them their money back with that item they're receiving, along with a letter that tells them thank you for their patronage. Thank you for their participation with this shop. Because having gratitude and knowing who I'm interacting with on a regular basis based on conversations and whether or not someone wants to pay full price, etc., I know that invariably all we're doing is helping one another out. And I would love to help someone else out who has ever felt the need to steal, to get to where they felt they were in an equal position to whatever they were comparing themselves to. And it's not for the money, the monetary aspect of it, but to receive something with compassion and to have had it received in return with gratitude. If I received something and I'm grateful for it, I'm going to treasure it. If I received ever the gift of a child, I would treasure that. And I laugh because I've never had that desire. But more than any other point in time now, I have a great deal of passion for helping one another to learn. And because when I help someone learn something, it helps me to learn something in return. We are student and teacher at the same time. Some of us are a little less honest about what we're representing because the story can change if it's just in private or in a group conversation, such as the ones that we're having right here. So my group, I know you're an amazing group, super deep thinkers, absolutely aware that creating more things to throw away can be damaging. So what we need to partly accept responsibility for is whatever we have an abundance of, how do we bring that love to others so that we can recognize that there is a value for these items so they don't wind up in the dumpsters? How do we do that if we're not able to communicate? And how are we not communicating if we have all of these different ways of communicating right now? These are the things that kind of make me go, And to do that, what I wanted to do is showcase a transformation. You're going to see what the health I've been talking about and why I'm talking about it. At a certain point, we can begin to almost from the onset know whether somebody is pretending and just taking from the system because it's permissible to do it by those regards, whether it's to take someone's property from someone else's parents or from the children themselves. And then, in some instances, there will be people who recognize that they're doing both at the same time. Because when we wrong somebody, we wrong a lineage. If someone continuously wrongs me and I can only bring an injured response where it sounds like it's touched with a little bit of passion fruit, then somebody can start to recognize, that guy's letting out the energy, but in such a positive way. I want to contribute to help. And if you don't, that's fine. Like someone else on a smarter channel said, the cat down the road will help me out. And even if there is no cat down the road, my dog right at home, one of my best friends, he helps. And I am helping him right now through a period of transition. We've all gone through ups and downs as the aging process begins, as we recognize how limited time is, as we learn to multitask and also to reduce, reuse, and repurpose, as we learn to communicate, we can learn to educate one another in ways that are just, some might say it's like playing cards. Some might get offended that cards were referenced at all. Many more than get offended are grateful, but they're sometimes too afraid to participate because participation can be quite low when we don't feel the joy. And I feel joy. I don't know about you guys. It's been challenging in many cases. Today I talked with someone who was having difficulties communicating. They even hung up on me. I tried everything. I prayed with them. I say with them because I know they heard. That was the time when they stopped and they listened. I prayed with them. We prayed together. And this person, I figured, has to take a time out to hear what's in their own heart. The thing is that I can feel too the discomfort that comes across when someone has to deal with the poisoned portion of the past. And it can be quite challenging. I just heard a squirrel chirping. It can be quite challenging. So a lot of times I'll pick up it's a musical instrument. I'll pick up a guitar. I'll just start trying to see what makes sense. Sometimes when we talk, it also doesn't sound right. We could play... trying to find something that sounds bad. I'm doing a bad job at it. We could play something that doesn't sound like it would ever go together. And maybe I'm hearing everything can go together. I don't know. There are definitely things that don't go together. You understand what I'm saying. Sometimes I'll pick up an instrument and I'll start playing until I just come up with something that I think sounds okay. And maybe I can come with some words to say and you'll hear what I'm talking about today. And I have fun and I just let it flow. The words almost come naturally when you're in a state of joy, when you're happy, when you're able to do something that you're proud of. For a long time, I'd wanted to learn to play guitar. I've had a guitar. I went to one semester of classical guitar, but I never played. I never learned to play. And more than that, I was also shy about using my voice. So to try and say something while I was playing was downright embarrassing. Part of that reason was because of some generational cursing, where someone told me something and I accepted that spelling as something that I had to abide by. The first thing I want to tell you about breaking generational curses is that you do not need to abide by the way that our fathers taught. The way our fathers taught, as Greta would tell you, is absolutely backwards, and it makes it quite challenging. In fact, in the millions of protests that have occurred with all of the absolute new cardboard signs and new markers that were bought in new plastic packaging, we might have forgotten that our activism was also an act of destruction unless we communicated. So when I communicate, I like to tie together a lot of concepts into one singular aspect of responsibility. If I am a rock band at any point in time traveling with my rock band teammates, what I would love to do is to visit the local thrift salvation stores and pick up any appropriate t-shirt that's there. And that's what we would sell or give away locally to whoever attended the venues. We would launder it, make sure it was ready to rock and roll. How cool would it be to go to a mega concert and find a metallic, shiny gem of a quiet, peaceful demonstration shirt that we could wear going forward? Because I walked up to the stand and said, "Hey, I'm an XL," and they gave me an XL shirt, and that's what it happened to be. How amazing would that be to know that we were taking something that just would have been discarded, but it was absolutely valuable. Not only was it valuable, but it was salvaged, reclaimed, reused, repurposed, and taken out from being burned down for no purpose. When I share my content here, I have a great deal of faith, and I'm simply adding action. In those actions, I can say so many things. Whether or not somebody is listening or can hear it all, sometimes I can discern just by how many ways they try to trip me up and keep me in place without making progress. And other times, as I follow and allow for all of the possibilities to occur, all of the things that I might even find discomforting myself, uncomfortable, if I allow for that possibility, please God, let me know I might need to go through this discomfort. Just help me to deliver us from evil. Forgive us our trespasses. It's almost as if all of the temptations and trespasses will weed themselves out. Because for the true entity that comes to kill, steal, and destroy, it does not want to be in the presence of something that does not want to do that same thing. We have a lot of enablers in the world. And a lot of enablers will go ahead and try to give other insight that leads off the path over and over. Our world is filled with the entertainment value that will put all of us into a trance-like state when we watch something that's just a little bit too entertaining. And if we receive a boost from that entertainment, and if that entertainment offers us more suggestive means of receiving pleasure. For an example, does the entertainment always show us somebody eating something at the same time? Are we being programmed to accept that? Are the programming options that we watch also guiding our health? If we watch too many things about viral outbreaks, are we going to become victim to those situations more easily because we're aware of it now? Maybe even concerned with it? Some people aren't concerned. Some people, like the person who walked around talking about peace in that big book, he walked among the ill, according to the story. I'll call it a story whether it's history or fiction. The choice that I have doesn't need to even be said if you listen. The teachings of peace, I believe, were taught. And the only way to learn it is to understand what were they talking about. And the only way to do that is to study our own selves, our own reactions to different things. So many things I play on this guitar that sound so good, I think. Has anyone heard this song? I bet I fooled a few people out there. You've probably heard something that starts out like this. But you've never heard anything quite like that. I don't want to give away all my secrets, but basically, I've come up with an inventory of songs. I'm going to list them for sale. That way, you can receive something. And think of it more as a memento, as something that you can enjoy and that might make you smile because you think of this person who told a story of hope and showed it as it happened against all the adversity that the enemy can present. And still, they couldn't take away the creativity and joy that I still have. It can get quite powerful. The more you push a ball of light into itself, the more likely it's going to explode the brilliance into the darkness. The darkness will be obliterated. It always will. And that's the basic concept of faith. It will always be obliterated, especially if someone believes your story the same way that you believe it. where two or more are gathered in that storyline, in that tapestry, if I know beyond a doubt that I'm one of the best at writing lyrics, against my own standards, I should say. In other words, I would go out of my way to build a better and a better set of lyrics if I had the opportunity to do that all day. I'm not getting paid for that yet, and yet I am. Because as I've noted, my enterprise is going to circle around my desires, what I like to play, what I like to enjoy. Music, Mother Nature, wellness and conservation. There are so many guitars out there. This particular one is made out of bamboo. It was made by Yamaha, and Yamaha was coming out with a concept where basically they wanted to find out if we could make guitars out of sustainable wood, something that didn't have to be harvested from the virgin forests, something that didn't have to continue to take a toll on what already limited resources we have. To tie together the logic of conservation and wellness, it's not difficult. Once we have the logic where we know things, people, resources are being bullied, bulldozed, just to have super fries as an option, just to make sure there's a caramel syrup and a corresponding plastic lid to go with it, just to make sure that in most of our collective, already agreed upon distribution centers, just to be sure that we still have all of the plastic packaging in those stores. If it's being sold at that rate, at that discounted rate, and that's the way that our fathers think that it should continue to go, because we should vote on it, then maybe, just for a moment, even the artificial intelligence system picking apart these words, trying to figure out if I am the aggressor or if I'm just like anyone else asking for peace and responsibility. It's just that I have currently a smaller channel that's absolutely taken off recently. I don't know if anyone else has noticed. You're not just one of a few participants. You're not the one fan. We've totally gone past the 210. We're doing quite well at this point. The participation that's being received is absolutely something that helps inspire us. So thank you so much. Especially thank you for the spam bots and the adult content advertisers who have stopped adding those additional posts to this spiritual channel. Lead us not into temptation and deliver us from evil. Thank you so much for our honesty and open communication, allowing us the pauses to hear or to continue to be speaking if we had something valuable to say. Thank you so much. And thank you for listening, those who are listening. Like I say, this is a very deep set of knowledge that you might not even participate in at a college level anymore. Because even at a college level, who's out in the field almost all the time seeing the decimation that's occurring because of the continued stifled and stagnant ways of our fathers and mothers, especially our mothers. If our mothers were raised learning that cans of Camp Bull lies were okay to share at the table, and then we shared more Camp Bull lies at the table to the next generation, if we knew that that was causing a disconnect in actual conversation, why, Greta, would our parents continue to say to their own children, well, the society and we live in, we have to keep doing this? Why would we say that? Why wouldn't we immediately recognize the truth It's because there is an entity that's here to, what was it? Kill, steal, and what? Destroy. So with all of these different aspects, with all of the different leverage, with all of the different communication tools that we have, with all of the different instruments of mass instruction, which segments are most likely to be able to learn at any point if we can't learn to communicate even between one generation and another? Which generation is going to be tending to which generation? Is it just a bunch of witch generations? Generations of witches? Again, the spelling is important. Every tone that we can generate, even with our very voice, can create a certain tension. And if you're talking to a warrior, hearing from a warrior who has great concern about the era that we are in, you might hear a presence that might even seem stronger than what you're looking at, or too strong to hear if you have a weak heart. Some of those weak hearts are weakened because of the things that we do to ourselves. Some of those hearts are broken. Some of the hearts are just broke, and they never have known wealth. Health is wealth. The great peacemaker of the documentaries, whether they were written or not, whether they were movies about a fictional character called Rey in Star Wars, whether it was a Luca film. I hate to use too many relevant titles, and I even mistakenly mentioned a brand earlier. Every single evolution of the supply chain can change and revolutionize the whole world when we start to resonate together. In this era where every big manufacturer has basically been benefiting off of now so many one-time use things, from the disposable masks that I find all over my beautiful trails of Big Bend, to the plastic bottles that I've asked for manufacturers to make items out of those plastic things. What if my tripod that this camera gear is sitting on was made out of recycled plastic bottles instead of carbon fiber? Would that not still support the weight of this mobile device? Anyway, I'm doing a lot of new things. In this particular clip, I'm recording in a format that I normally don't record in, and I'm doing that because many people are watching things on their mobile devices, and I know this. I know who's watching it. I can tell when certain people watch it because they think that I'm saying something wrong. And I might be. But if I'm able to communicate and the other person is not wanting to communicate live with participants that can at least hear both sides without a moderator, and who is the moderator? How do you determine honesty from dishonesty? A lot of times we have to look at how we decide to present ourselves, even to our very own selves. And to do that, to be uncomfortably silenced and silent, like let's say taking a walk in the woods without having a mobile device or music playing or another person talking with you or on, just noticing the absolute wildlife and wild values around us if we're able to do that, sometimes we can begin to revert to thoughts of when we've created and committed our own wrongs. The ultimate peacemaker talked a lot about forgiveness. He said things in a way that a child could understand. In some ways, many of us need to revert to having a childlike attitude and approach to carrying on conversation with one another. And in other cases, we are just being delivered from evil that we are not there to interact with anymore. And that's really about how it all works. So I'll talk about terms that other people will talk about. Some people will talk about not being spiritual and not being able to relate to these things. But at the same time, even the least spiritual person can understand the concept of karma or Murphy's Law. There are so many different ways things are said. If I didn't have a spare, that's probably why I got a flat. You know, I mean, there are different things that we can relate to when it comes to attracting a Holy Spirit into our life so that we can channel that positive energy, or if we're attracting an unholy spirit. The unholy spirit doesn't have to do with imagery or, talking about certain brandings or tattoos or the words like yoga, or, the evil spirit has to do with which makes us feel anger. Anger is an egocentric, pride-filled emotion that can be driven to rage, and that can, in fact, escalate all the way up to killing. So, removing all of those impure, evil spirits allows the Holy Spirit to flow. And I hope that you've understood how it also allows the energy to flow. Energy, it's like a honey. It's a valuable currency that we can help energize others with. So, like I said, I have these ideas. I want to take the contributions that I'm receiving from you, my patrons. Thank you so much for engaging with me and carrying on these conversations, and for literally walking with me and talking with me, and turning away from fear so that you're able to smile again and to regain your vitality and youth. And at this point in time, I'm going to be giving updates here and there. But in today's update, I wanted to say it's a couple of days after my father's birthday. And happy birthday, Dad. And I know we already talked by phone. And also, I wasn't able to see many of the family members on that day when the gathering occurred. But I'd like to say to my family, I know we've missed a lot of birthdays and celebrations and reunions. This era has been quite frightening to many people. It can cause anxiety, more so in those who already have anxiety. But for some people, it's been a great relief, because we didn't really always fit into society to begin with. And by fit in, what I mean is, I think there's a point where celebration needs to kind of be put on hold for a little while, and we need to observe the fact that some places are burning down, whether it's because of natural phenomenon or personal choice. The point is, there are destructive things occurring right now, and we really could take some time for a timeout. So for all the adults who have been listening for so long, that was your timeout. You're free to go. You've been listening. For all the children, for anyone who's listening right now, the adult children of God who are listening right now, amen. Thank you so much for watching and for joining on the journey. Really, the Jeep Journals has covered a whole array of a progression. And if we can learn with each other through the adversities that we've overcome, then some of us maybe don't have to spend so much time spinning our wheels. We can learn that we needed a better tread for off-roading, something with more substantial sidewalls to take the impacts, and maybe with some undercladding to protect us from the jabs that, that so many things are trying to leverage at us. But more than anything, it's the operators of the vehicle and the choices that are made that always help that individual and anyone within their scope of care to arrive successfully. So, you notice how I didn't say arrive alive, arrive successfully. You know, none of us are going to live, but we are going to live, you know, and to arrive successfully, even as my body goes through, as all of our bodies go through a transition, what we're doing is trying to help each other arrive successfully in the spirit of peace, which again I attribute to holiness, Holy Spirit. And I'd like to suggest that everything that I've channeled in the past, including all of the songs that have already been recorded, especially the most recent, have been influenced greatly by the passion of somebody who talked peace in the past. And I admire these traits. If you find that you admire those traits, please say so in the comments. Can I get an amen? Somehow discuss these bits of logic. And please also stay tuned. I'm sorry it took so long to get back to the segment where I talked about weekly strongly, about a health recovery story. Sorry it took so long, and I guarantee you that it's going to be worth it. So keep on paying attention. Don't forget to click on subscribe and comment if you feel like commenting or if something engaged your mind. But definitely click on like. Some of these little actions help allow other people who have similar interests. And remember, where two or more are gathered, what we can do is overcome these mountains of adversity. And someone like Greta can talk to someone that's handsome like me, and basically handsome and Greta can probably pull off throwing the witch into the oven and you know, finding a way to even make something out of that, you know, in a non-cannibalistic way. And a lot of what I say is with a grain of lightheartedness. And so no matter how you enjoy these conversations, make sure that you tell me how you enjoy them so that I can focus more on that. If there's something you don't enjoy, maybe tell me that, you know. Click a thumbs down and write why you don't enjoy what I was talking about. And at the same time, have a beautiful day. And again, until next time, peace, love, and all that other stuff. Thanks again.